All right, let's get a Most High hand. As always, thank the Lord that the brothers and sisters in this truth are able to endure during this time. My name is Officer Isaiah Olive from the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. Started out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York. We've been teaching so-called Negroes, so-called Hispanics, and so-called Native Indians that they're the Lord's chosen people. According to the Bible, we've been teaching this truth since 1969 under Commander General Yohana. As you know, there's a lot of Salakia. This might be a little too close. Salakia. As you know, there's a lot of mayhem going on out there. A lot of rioting, a lot of protesting. In the UPK, we've been protesting since 1969 in every corner in America. And what you got to understand is that there's one important thing that you have to really, really brainwash yourself. It's the idea that the idea that you can get along with the people that are murdering you, historically have been murdering you, historically have been persecuting you and trying to destroy this nation. The thought that you can get along with your oppressor is something that amazes me. You know what I mean? Despite what he does from time and time and time again, you think you can join hands with your oppressor in your fight, in your struggle, when in actuality there's always an ulterior motive with the so-called white man. And what we got to realize is that we really got to dig through the historical records and really see the true nature of our oppressor and the crimes that he's been committing against us since the days of Rome, since the days of Greece, since the Grecian Empire and the Roman Empire. We've been struggling with our oppressor. Today we'll talk about the siege in 70 AD. What's very important about that is that Christ prophesied. The Rock for putting up the attendance. Christ prophesied that Jerusalem would be sieged, and he prophesied that in Matthew 24. So we'll definitely get into that. Daniel the prophet also talked about the abomination of desolation, and Christ reiterated that and mentioned what Daniel had brought up in the Old Testament. And why is the siege of 70 AD important? It's because we've had our history with our oppressor when it came to protesting, when it came to revolting, and we failed at every instance that we've created that we've butt heads with our oppressor. We failed time and time again. Now, why is it that the protesting doesn't work? Well, it didn't work in Rome either. You know, they revolted. When you study the first Jew wars and the second Jew wars with the Romans, time and time, what you understand is that we failed in the idea of not considering the prophecy that the Lord gave us in regards to keeping his commandments, and also in retrospect to breaking his commandments. And our oppressor knows that, and the other nations know that when we serve our Lord, who can stop us, right? Rock, if you're online, type in Khan if you're online, Rock. But before we get to that, let's go into the beginning, the book of Genesis. Now, why is the book of Genesis important? Because the Most High cursed Adam, cursed Eve, and he also cursed the snake Now, it's not talking about a literal snake, but it is talking about, it is something figurative, meaning this snake represented a person that had the characteristics of a snake. It's a metaphor, and this snake has always laid a snare for our people since the time of Adam. And what we have to understand is that more important than knowing who you are is knowing who your enemy is. And we really gotta, put this in mind, because at the end of the day, you're in the midst of your enemies, but you still find it, after 50, 60 years of marching, you still find it so that it is important for you to join him. You put an emphasis on, inviting your oppressor to help you with your problems, seeking your oppressor, seeking his peace. And what we got to understand is the reason why we failed in every attempt. When you think about the historical riots in America, the reason why it's failed and nothing has changed is because we have not acknowledged the Most High and what he has put in place for us, right? He gave us the decree, he gave us the solution to solving the hate crime that our oppressor has been putting on us, and we still, time and time, refuse to take on. We refuse to try the Most High. You know what I mean? If we would think for a sec that there is a power that's here to protect us and to serve, and to serve our enemies a recompense for all the things that he's done, and we could use that at our whim, why don't we sit at the round table? Why don't your black leaders sit at the round table with the UPK and understand that we have the truth, and really assemble under one umbrella? You know what I mean? You got so many different factions, you got so many different religions, and you got so many corrupt black and Hispanic leaders that are only out there for lucre's sake, that are only out there, that are money hungry criminals is what I like to call them. You know what I mean? That have left the flock, right? The people that we consider to be in charge have assembled with have joined or are in league with our enemies. And so now we rolled into 2020. 2020, we trying to figure out, what to make of all this. We trying to figure out what to make of all this protesting and this rioting. You know what I mean? Is it something that's going to work, or is it going to be to no avail? And I can guarantee you, history repeats itself. It will be to no avail, right? Especially if your oppressor is involved, which is, to me, I don't know, I can't put my finger on it, but to me, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. I've never seen our oppressor join in any of our causes. I know one of the more recent topics is, the so-called Africans and how they haven't even, stepped foot out there to help us with our cause. You know what I mean? And you still want to identify with those people too, with those stinking Africans that have committed horrendous crimes against you as well. But let's go to Genesis chapter 25. Salakia, let me get there. 1 second. Before we do that, if there's any questions online, let's get the questions out the way. We'll give it a sec. be shy now. If you got any questions, ask your questions. You know what I mean? These classes are very important, especially during these times, man. Now more than ever, you should seek understanding, right? You should clear the confusion that's in your mind that's telling you to be a drug addict. You should learn. You should come sit under the foot of the men of the Lord, right? Sit under the men of the Lord and learn how to fight your lust, right? This ain't no hocus pocus. This ain't magic. This ain't the Christian church. We will train you, right? We will train you to be a priest and prophet of the Lord, and to finally do something with your life that's meaningful. To finally do something in your life that's going to help your nation, right? We need soldiers, right? But we don't want everybody. And with that note, if there's no questions, I'm going to continue. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me. I'm monitoring the chat today. I'm going to be a little bit more interactive. If you online and you just sitting there fiddling your thumb, not knowing what to do, I'm pretty sure you have a lot of questions. And you're probably going to the wrong people with those questions, which could lead to your destruction. You got to be careful, right? Now, the Bible says to prove all things, and we contend with anyone that thinks that they're all knowing and that thinks that they are knowledgeable and have understanding. We contend with anybody, and we'll let you know how stupid you really are. You know what I mean? It's the same way I was let known how dumb I was when I came into the school, and that I didn't know anything. Right? Well, now let's find out. Let's get into more detail on your enemy. Right? Genesis chapter 25. All right. Let's look at the characteristics of your enemy. Let's also look at how all this came about. Why, our oppressor continues to try to kill us in these streets. Why he continues to further his oppression towards the Lord's chosen people. And let's find out what it is. This ain't nothing that is a secret. You know what I mean, this is in the same book that you've been. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna pull out the sword. Salaki, let me get the actual sword. I ain't gonna use the digital sword today. I'm gonna pull out the sword today, just so y'all don't think I'm making stuff up. I got the sword right here, and we're gonna go to Genesis chapter 25. All right. Okay, so Genesis chapter 25. Let's go to verse 21. All right. I had a friend of mine's, a brother in the world, as I may say, called me up. And it's funny when you start to get a foresight of who your enemy is, and you start to detect that there's something going on with Massa, right? There's something that I've been ignoring and have not kind of been in tune with in regards to his racism, in regards to his hatred for me. And so this brother called me up, and he I guess he wanted further understanding of our oppressor. And I brought up Genesis chapter 25 to let him know why the animosity towards us is heavy. To let him know why our oppressor will continue to be a threat to us as long as we are united, or as long as we are trying to unite with him, right? But let's read. Genesis chapter 25, starting at verse 21. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren. So if Rebekah was barren and wasn't able to have children. And so Isaac went to the man of the Lord and entreated of the Lord about his wife. And the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. So the Lord heard Isaac. Isaac wanted his wife to have a child, and the Lord heard it, and he entreated of Isaac's request or prayer. Let's keep reading. And so we know Rebekah conceived. Now here's verse 22. And the children, they were twins. So Rebekah was set to have twins. And here's the key. Here's the kicker to this ongoing beef that we have with our oppressor. And the children struggled together within her. Now, when it says to struggle, it means the children were at odds with each other in the womb. Meaning the children were basically fighting in the womb, right? They were struggling together in the womb, right? Now let's keep reading. And she said, if it be so, why am I thus? So, when you go through, after a certain stage of pregnancy, when a child starts to kick, a woman will start to feel that pain, right? Right? She'll start to feel it as the child is kicking inside. Now imagine you have twins in your womb and they're struggling with one another. They're basically fighting one another, right? And Rebekah wanted to know why is this happening, right? And she went to inquire of the Lord. Verse 23. And the Lord said unto her. Now, keep in mind, when she went to inquire of the Lord, what it means is she went to a man of the Lord to get answers, to figure out why the two are struggling in her womb, right? Or the two children are struggling in the womb. So here's what the Lord says. And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb. See, the Lord is the one that establishes nations, right? Now, what you got to understand is that the Lord said there's 2 nations in thy womb, right? So this what it's saying is that there's 2 different kind of people that you're carrying in your womb, right? Let's keep reading. And 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. Now the Lord is also telling Rebekah that these 2 are going to have completely different mannerisms, right? And we'll start to, as we go down, we'll start to see why they're 2 manner of people, right? They're 2 manner of people physically. They're 2 manner of people spiritually. And they're 2 manner of people when it comes to their characteristics, how they are, their being, meaning their soul, how they are. It's totally two totally different people, right? Let's keep reading. And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. So the Lord already made the separation, right, between the 2, right? The Lord already had what's the proper word I want to use? The Lord already had destined how these 2, what was gonna become of these 2. He already made the decision as to number 1, the manner of people that they were going to be, and the nation of people that they were going to be. This was in the womb. This was already decided, right? That's why in Jeremiah it said in the book of Jeremiah it says, let me pull it up. Salakia. I should have this. In Jeremiah it says, in Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5 it says, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Right? So the Lord knew who Esau would be, and the Lord knew who Jacob would be. Right? Because he said, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee and ordained thee to be a prophet unto the nations. Right? You see, our oppressor in the womb was ordained to be the wicked on the earth. Right? He was ordained to be the man of sin. Right? He was ordained to be the son of perdition. Right? This was because our oppressor had the spirit of the snake in the garden. The same spirit. Meaning this. Let's find out what Christ said about our oppressor. Right? Let's go to John chapter 8 verse 44. Let's find out what Christ said about the characteristics of our oppressor. Now, the biggest problem in our nation is the rich of Israel, right? They are our biggest problem. It's the Sadducees and the Pharisees. It's the people that have acquired riches in Babylon. They're the ones that have literally become our enemy, the enemy to the poor, right? And so the Sadducees and Pharisees were constantly going back and forth with Christ to try to figure out a way to get him executed, right? And Christ was always cutting them every time. And Christ described how our leaders were. Our leaders are the black version of our oppressor, right? We tell the world that our oppressor is the devil that the Bible speaks of. We say that, and we say that time and time again. And why is that very important to say that our oppressor is the devil that the Bible speaks of? Because what we're doing is we're reiterating and we're brainwashing you with the notion that our oppressor, the man that has put us in chains, that has raped, robbed, and murdered us, he's your enemy. And we have to constantly say that. It's like when you have a child, you constantly have to repeat things over and over until they get it. And we're going to continue to say that our oppressor is the devil that the Bible speaks of. The reason why we have to say that is because you're like a charmer messing with a snake. Eventually, you're going to get bitten, right? Eventually, you're going to get a knee. You're going to get choked out with a knee on your neck. Eventually, you're going to get shot for having a toy gun. Eventually, you're going to see why he is the wicked on the earth. You're going to see why he is the destroyer on the earth. But here's what Christ said to the leaders at the time that were in league with the Romans. Now, as we go into 70 AD and the siege of Jerusalem, what you got to understand is that the politics that was in play. Our leaders sold us out during that time, right? And also during that time, there was a divide amongst the people. And different groups like the Zealots started beefing with these other groups. And we'll really kind of get into more historical facts on how Jerusalem fell, and what was going on during the time. We'll stray away from less politics, but there comes a time. This was a time where we decided to revolt, to protest, and the result of it was a deadly result. The result of it just made things even worse and destroyed what little we had left of our nation, right? But and this is why it's very important to kind of be studious to this whole history of the siege of Jerusalem, because we have to realize that, if those revolts didn't work back then, it's not going to work today. And we have to realize, we got to stop. And what it did was, we would really have to blame the leadership of Israel at that time, and really have to blame the leadership of Israel today, right? And really have to dissect and understand that it's evident that our leaders have thrown us away. Our leaders have sold us out. We have to understand that. The rich of Israel has sold us out. But let's see what Christ said in John 8:44. We're gonna just pinpoint some characteristics of our oppressor. So he's basically cutting the Sadducees and Pharisees, letting them know that if you did believe in Moses, then you would have believed in me, because Moses spoke of me. But he knew they were blind, and he knew that they could not understand his speech. They couldn't hear his word. And that's a lot of our people today. They can't understand what we're saying, right? They can't hear our speech. They're dull of hearing, right? They're blinded because of the love that they have for their oppressor, because of the love that they have for America, because of the religious orders of Babylon that have brainwashed our people, because of the witchcraft that our oppressor has put on our people. Our people have become blind. They become asleep. And so now, why are we, the men of the prophet, the prophet of the Lord, the priests and prophets of the Lord, why are we important? Because in the midst of this COVID-19, as they're trying to reopen the country and reopen these businesses, it's not their decision whether they're going to, whether they're going to continue to bring normalcy back to this kingdom. It's up to the Most High, and it's up to the men of the Most High to really determine whether this is going to open back up. The Lord is looking down to see if there's any righteous men, on this planet. He's looking down to see, and he's not seeing it anywhere else outside of the UPK. So it really boils down to us, for the Lord to say, okay, I'm gonna tell the angel of death to fall back. But then more plagues will come, because there's more evils on this planet. Just like in Genesis 6, the Lord talked about the continual evil that we've committed. Okay. So he's talking to the Sadducees, Pharisees, and he says this, John 8:44, ye are of your father, the devil, meaning our leaders and those that were supposed to be our spiritual leaders, and those that are the rich of Israel. He's saying that they are just like their father. And what we have to understand is that when it says their father, it's talking about our oppressor. It's talking about the so-called white man. Meaning, our leaders, he's saying, you are just like the Romans. You are just like the oppressor. And really, he's going to point out the characteristics of why they're similar to their father, right? So basically, Christ is saying that our oppressor is our black leader's spiritual father. That's what he's trying to say. And watch what he says here. Ye are of your father, the devil. So this is Christ calling our oppressor, calling the Romans that were in charge at the time, that occupied Jerusalem at the time. He's calling them the devil, and he's saying that our black leaders and our spiritual leaders are of their father, right? The devil, right? And here's the thing. And the lust of your father ye will do. Our oppressor's a lustful, wicked bastard. That's what he is, right? He allows you to, he promotes your lust. He allows you to, live filthy and do wicked in the sight of the Lord, right? He said, I'll give you an example, right? The Lord forbids us to eat certain foods, right? He said it's okay to eat pork, right? It's the new white meat, right? At one point, he was locking brothers up for weed. So many probably millions of brothers are in prison for weed. Now what does he say? Oh, now you can smoke weed. They got dispensaries all over. Now it's okay to smoke weed. Now it's okay to fulfill the desires of your flesh and to follow after your lust. If you want to go up into a courtroom and marry another man, it's okay. You can do that. And what we fail to realize is that as we continue to be like him and continue to make efforts to try to join him and try to be equal with him, at the same time we're being destroyed, and we're falling into our own destruction, right? And he said, let's keep reading. And he said, and the lust of your father you will do. Now let's find out some of the characteristics of our oppressor. He continues. He said, and he's talking about our oppressor. He says, he was a murderer from the beginning, right? Now, who was the murderer in the beginning? That was, if you remember the story of Cain and Abel, Cain murdered his brother, right? And the Lord put a mark on Cain, right? And why is that mark very important? That mark is very important because it's a mark that actually protects him from people trying to kill him, which is why you cannot harm a blonde hair on the so-called white man's body. You cannot harm him one bit because the Lord put a mark on him, and that if any man harms him, he will, sevenfold will come upon that man, right? So keep in mind, our oppressor is under the protection of the Lord with that mark. And we got to keep that in mind. Maybe this might be a little too advanced for some, but understand there's a reason why, there's a reason why when we try to harm him and we try to fight him, we lose time and time again. There's a reason for that, right? Salakia. Let's keep reading. So we know that one of his characteristics is that he's a murderer, right? I mean, our oppressor has a desire to kill, right? This whole COVID-19, right? Billy was on timeout for 15 minutes. And when Billy got off timeout, he wants to wreak havoc, which is why you see a lot of our oppressors out there protesting with our brothers and sisters in the world. He just wants to wreak havoc on the planet. You can't lock him up for one little bit, because when he gets out, I mean, he is going to destroy everything in his path, which is why he needs to be in a cage, and you need to throw away the keys, because he is a walking plague, right? When you think of our oppressor, you should think of death and destruction. Let's keep reading. Let's not spend too much time on this. Let's keep reading. And abode, and it says, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. You really want to believe your politicians. You want to believe the White House administration and the course of news that goes on, when at the end of the day, Christ said there is no truth in him, right? You think that you'll be able to figure this out, right? You think you'll be able to clue all this together, when in actuality, what you should be doing is listening to Commander General Yohana and listening to the men in the ISUPK that can really direct your path, so you don't fall into the snares of your oppressor, right? While you busy out there holding hands with him, understand that his day is coming, right? And here's the thing. If there's a drive-by going on, right? There's a target during that drive-by, and you're going to be the innocent bystander that gets shot. That's you joining hands with your oppressor in this kumbaya coalition, right? And this is what Christ is saying, right? Now you ask Christians to explain to you this scripture as to who Christ is calling the devil, right? Let's keep reading. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. Meaning, our oppressor has the spirit of that snake in the garden that lied to Eve, which caused the fall of man. He has the spirit of Cain that murdered his brother, right? But let's go back to Genesis. Let's get more characteristics. Let's really dive into more of our oppressor's characteristics. So like in Genesis 25, let's go back to that real quick. I say by 8 o'clock we'll get into we'll read on the siege of 70 AD. Here it is. Okay, Salaki. All right. So we know that there's two nations in their womb. We went over that, and here it is. And it says this: and the one people shall be stronger than the other people. So in the womb, the Lord had already prophesied that us, so-called Negroes, so-called Hispanics, so-called Native Indians, or so-called natives, that we would be stronger than the other people. The other people is talking about our oppressor and his people, right? And he also prophesied that the elder shall serve the younger, and the elder was our oppressor, Esau, Edom, and the Lord prophesied that he would serve us, right? Now, let's find out more about him. Salaki, bear with me. Okay, let's find out more. And let's read verse 27, right? Let's show you why the Lord created two nations and two manner of people. In verse 27, Genesis 25, verse 27, it says, and the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter. This is another thing of our oppressor that we have to consider, is that he is a cunning hunter, right? A man of the field, right? Esau, when we get to Genesis, when Isaac decided that to give that he was going to bless Esau, Jacob's mother set it up because she knew that Jacob was the one that the Lord was going to give the promise to. She knew that Jacob was the one that was going to be stronger. That she knew that Esau was the one that was going to serve. Jacob, because this was prophesied to her, during the time that she entreated of the Lord. And so now, what Isaac ended up giving the blessing to Jacob, because Jacob had deceived. Jacob's mother had caused it so that Jacob could deceive his father into giving him the blessing. And when Esau came back, he was crying bitterly, and he was asking for that, also for a blessing. And so what Isaac decided to do, Isaac said that you'll receive the fat, you will get the fatness of the earth, right? Which is why our oppressor is so, it has excelled so much in the business realm, right? Which is why he's the financier, which is why he's able to excel and really dominate the business world. But he also blessed him with the sword and said that, he would be, he would live and die by the sword, which is why he's able to, which is why no nation on the planet is able to stop him, right? Because the Lord, because Isaac had blessed him with the sword. The Lord had blessed him with the sword. Salakia. All right. And with that, so we kind of get an idea. So now let's run it down, right? Well, what are some of the things that we've learned just in Genesis and in John chapter 8, verse 44 of our oppressor, right? We understand that he is a snake, meaning he is very subtle the way he moves. He moves on his belly. He's very slick and he's very conniving. He's a slithery bastard, right? We also understand that he was a murderer, right? He has the nature of a murderer, and we also know that there's no truth in him. He's also a liar, right? Shalakia. What other characteristics did we learn? He's also a hunter, which is why, Negro, if you think you can get away with a crime and you think, Esau is not going to catch you, our oppressor's not going to catch you, you're fooling yourself, right? He is a cunning hunter. He knows how to hunt you. He knows how to find you, right? He's also a man of the field. So he knows how to navigate. He knows how to move, right? So these are some of the characteristics. So now let's get into Christ's prophecy of what did Christ prophesy in Matthew chapter 24. Let's read what Christ prophesied would happen to us. Salaki. Bear with me. Let me get it. All right. So Matthew chapter 24. Right? It's let's start at verse 1. We'll jump around. Matthew chapter 24, verse 1. And Yahushua went out and departed from the temple. And his disciple came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. So his disciples go up to Christ, and asking him to, hey, look at these buildings out here, right? They're amazed by how these buildings look, right? Keep in mind that his disciples came from the hood, right? So they weren't really privy to going to Jerusalem, right, and seeing these temples, right? They were hood niggas, and here's what Christ said. And Yahushua said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Now you see all these businesses that are getting destroyed, right? This is just this is not even the icing on the cake. This is just a preliminary of what's going to happen. Christ prophesied that not one stone would be left upon another, right? America is fitting to burn. It is self-destructing. It's imploding, right? And Christ prophesied that this would happen. This is just the beginning of sorrows, right? And then now let's verse 3. And he sat upon the Mount of Olives. The disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us when these things shall be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world. So now Christ is going to go through a series of things where, you're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars. He's going to, he's going to talk about nations rising against nations, kingdom against kingdom. Right. And, all this, these prophecies are still current and have come to pass. You had World War I, World War II. You know what I mean? You had many of wars. And right now you're starting to hear rumors of wars between China and the U.S. So he's going through these prophecies, right? Now let's keep reading. Let's get to the kicker so we can jump into it. So this is the part we want, right? Verse 14. Matthew chapter 24, verse 14. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Now, pay attention to that, right? What we're saying is going to be preached unto all the world. Now, his disciples hearing that, they're not, they don't quite understand the reference to that. In 2020, we're able to reach out to everybody, right? Whether it's through an online medium, whether it's through the schools that we have across the world. One way or another, everyone's going to hear the truth. They're going to hear it, right? And then he said, then the end shall come. But he has another prophecy in verse 15 that Daniel brought up in the Old Testament. He said, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. So the abomination of desolation is when the Romans came and sacked Jerusalem and started to offer swine in the temple, right? And this, he said, was spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So this is a little bit of time after Christ had left the scene. In 70 AD, the Romans came and sacked Jerusalem. Now let's get into the story. Now I wanted to bring that up before we get into the actual historical facts on that. So we're gonna pull up. Let's see what source I'm gonna use. Salakia, bear with me. Just get a quick synopsis of this. Salakia, bear with me. I'm just gonna pull this up. We're going to go to I need a little bit more detail, Salakia. Let me see if I can find another source. Okay, we're going to go to history.net. Let's read this real quick, all right? At history.net.com, it's the Great Siege of Jerusalem. Right? This is what Christ had prophesied in Matthew chapter 24, verse 15. And we read, Salakia. All right. Let's go. In 66 AD, Judea, Galilee, and neighboring regions were ripe for revolt. It was the 13th decade of Roman power over the Jewish homelands, exercised indirectly at first through the bloody and brutal Herodian dynasty. So the Herodian dynasty was a period of a lot of bloodshed, right? And what we have to understand, let me pull up the Herodian dynasty. Right? They went through 13 Salaki. They went through 13 decades of Roman occupation, right? Of Roman rulership. And many rulers have come and have put their stain in society. But the Herodian dynasty was one of the more brutal ones, right? And we'll read about King Herod, the Herodian dynasty. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Okay, it says this. Salakia. See if I can find it. Salakia, bear with me, y'all. Let me get this real quick. Okay, so just a little bit on the Herodian dynasty. We just want something. So the Herodian dynasty is named after Herod the Great, who was recognized as the king of the Jews by the Romans in 40 and continued to rule until 504 BCE. In these years, he created a powerful vassal kingdom with Caesarea and Jerusalem as splendid capitals. He was succeeded by his son Archelaus, Antipas, and Philip. But in 60, the Romans added Archelaus' realm. The kingdom was reunited by Agrippa I, who ruled from 41 to 44. After his death, Roman re-annexed Judea, leaving around the Sea of Galilee to Agrippa II. So King Agrippa was the one that had, who I believe the Apostle Paul stood in front of before the Apostle Paul got executed, right? So now there's a series of kings that were ruling the Jews at the time, and the Herodian dynasty was a very important one because it was a bloody and brutal period, which was the Herodian dynasty. But let's keep reading. Then directly through a prefect such as Pontius Pilate, and after the reign of the emperor Claudius, a procurator in Jerusalem, as the tremendous impact of Roman might and Greek culture undermined Jewish traditional culture. And now pay attention to this. It says, as the tremendous impact of Roman might and Greek culture, it undermined Jewish traditional culture. So the same way it is today was the same way it was back then, where we started to forget our own culture because of the influence of the Roman and Greek culture. It undermined our culture, right? And so what it started to do is it started to create a divide, right? This is where you hear the term conquer and divide, where you conquer people and you divide them by means of implanting your religion and your culture and your language. So now it creates a divide amongst the people, right? They start to dwindle away from their own culture. They start to slowly go through this brainwashing mechanism that undermines their culture. And this is what happened with us during the transatlantic slave trade, is that our culture started to be undermined through the culture of our oppressors, right? Let's keep reading. So society split between those who avidly embraced the new, cautious appeasers, a priestly case fixated on power, a growing number of radicals out to repurify the faith, and the sweating human ingredients of revolution, right? So now there were some that were sick and tired of how the Romans were treating them, right? And this is how revolts happen, is when you get sick and tired of being killed by your oppressor, when you get sick and tired of the persecution that the acts of hatred, right, that your oppressor is delivering on a daily basis. The Romans, they were especially what was unique about the Romans is that their tax system was something that further oppressed our people, right? Now you look at it today, where everything is being taxed, everything, anything, your phone bills, your cable, everything is being taxed, right? And it's something that's making us fall deeper into an oppressive state, and it's culminating us to behave like and envy our oppressors to the point where we want to be like him, right? When our oppressor, he understand this, is that he knows how to operate in this place, because this is designed for him. Through the means of white supremacy, he's able to operate. That's why he goes jogging in the morning. That's why when he's walking his dog, he's happy-go-lucky. There's a calmness to him. There's a calmness to him as he's prancing around in this kingdom. And then when you look at us, there's signs of distress, signs of trauma, PTSD that we go through in this kingdom, right? But let's keep reading. We know of Jesus Christ and his crucifixion and wonder at the cruelty of the temple priests and Romans. But there's a backstory. By Christ's lifetime, Jewish society had already begun to fracture under the weight of Pax Romana. And it'll explain what Pax Romana is. This was an age of self-proclaimed messiahs, of omens and portents, but also of the Sicarii, the Dagomen, assassins whose specifics are lost in the murk of the past. Historians argue over their origins, but no one disputes the existence of Sicarii or their mobster influence on the looming zealots' revolts. So now, here's the kicker to this whole revolution that took place, and the first and second Jew wars with the Romans, is that there was men in the kingdom at the time that were what they called zealots, and which is why they called the zealot revolts. There was basically fractions of like civil wars in the midst of us, between us, where certain groups that had influence were beefing with other groups in Jerusalem and in the neighboring cities. Now, we'll read. The Romans wanted order and tax revenues. Remember, I brought this up about how they would come, and in Israel we don't tax in Israel, right? The tax system was a Roman custom, right? And this is why John the Baptist told the soldiers to exact their pay, like don't rob the people, right? Be content with your wages and commit no violence toward the people. But what the Romans were doing, as they were collecting these tax revenues, they were going around slaughtering us. They were going around mistreating us. They were going around stealing more than they should have taken, right? And this started to irk the people. Now let's keep reading. The Sanhedrin, The temple associated ruling class of Jews wanted an end to cults, schisms, and the advance of foreign culture and pagan gods. So now you had one group that was trying to abolish a lot of these other movements, cultish movements that were going on, and schisms, meaning the divide, right? And how does a nation divide? A nation divides when the people start taking on someone else's culture, start taking on other gods that's not the God of the Bible, and these people were trying to put a stop to it, right? Because you got to keep in mind the Romans had so many gods that they worshipped. Eventually, this would be something that would influence us and would undermine our power, right? Let's keep reading. The Romans sought to extend their authority, the Sanhedrin to preserve theirs. Meanwhile, the common people suffered under a punishing system of financial levies. Banditry expanded alongside fanaticism, right? Now, we've been going through financial distress in this country for the last 400 years, right? And they continue to cause us to suffer under these financial levies, right? And eventually the Lord is going to step in like he did with the COVID-19. The Lord stepped in and he pressed our oppressor. He pressed him, and he opened up the pockets of the government to give out these checks, to slow down this kingdom so we can spend time with our family, to get the unemployment that we're getting, which is paying us more than when we were working in our slaves, right? So banditry expanded alongside fanaticism. So now you're starting to see the series of events that went on while this was going on. Now let's go. By 66 AD, Roman Palestine was ready to burst into flames. At this worst possible time, Rome had in place the clumsiest of its procurators. Jesus flourished. Jerusalem had already been rocked by events of prefiguring recent crises in Afghanistan. Sacred scrolls allegedly burned by Roman soldiers, and rioting after another Roman mooned the holy precincts. With blood already splashing the streets, Florus strong-armed the temple priests into making a massive payment to Rome from their treasury. So now, it's explaining more of what led to the fall and the siege of Jerusalem at this time, right? It's because the Romans continued to put more pressure on us, continued to put us under sufferance, which is what the Romans today are doing today. They're doing the same exact thing, right? Rumors made everything worse, as they do today. Florus soon found it wise to flee Jerusalem, but a Roman garrison remained behind until inflamed radicals massacred every legionary in the city. The die was cast, right? So now the Romans, for like 4 months, set up a garrison all around Jerusalem. And the thing about Jerusalem is that Jerusalem had such high walls and had such a defense system that it was hard to get through those walls, right? Because it was laid from one court. Here's a wall, and then imagine a court, then another wall. That's how it was layered at the temple. And so it's very hard to infiltrate. So they set up garrisons for a couple of months, and basically what they did was they starved out the people, where it was so bad to the point that we started eating our leather belts, right? We started to eat our children, the babies, right? It was that bad, right? They cut off the food supply. They cut off the route to the food supply. They put garrisons all around. Let's keep reading. Okay. It's just giving you more of this event. Let's get to, let me scroll down a little bit more for the sake of time. Oh, actually, it gets interesting. Let's keep reading. To the north, Galilee long had been home to religious extremism and popular discontent. Its people rose as well. Now, what you got to understand is there's a lot of fanaticism, and there was a lot of these different movements, religious orders and religious movements that were going on, where the people started to stray more and more away from the Most High, and they started to really become real extremists when it came to these different gods that they were worshiping, right? And so basically the cities were chaos, right? So it's explaining a little bit more about the chaos. Greeks killed, where it says this, where populations were mixed, as in Sisera, Maritima on the coast. Greeks killed Jews and Jews killed Greeks. When the Romans gained their footing, they backed the non-Jews. Of course they backed the non-Jews. They would, of course, have backed the Greeks, right? All right, but let's just get to the point of this. Bear with me. Let's get right to the kicker. All right, let's get right to it right here, right? It says this. So on this day in 70 CE, the Roman siege of Jerusalem ended as rebel forces in the city were vanquished. The siege and conquest of Jerusalem was the climax of the Great Revolt, which began 4 years earlier with a number of attacks by Jewish rebels in the land of Israel against Roman authorities. So we revolted. We were fighting them back, right? And this was going on for about 4 years. After Syrian-based legionaries failed to put down the unrest, responsibility for quelling the rebellion fell into the Roman general Vespasian, accompanied by his son Titus. They slowly made their way south from Galilee, beginning in 67 CE, conquering town after town. So they literally went from town after town. And then when Vespasian returned to Rome to become emperor in 69 CE, Titus took over the leadership of the counter-offensive. Now let's keep reading. Titus began his assault on Jerusalem in March of 70 CE with the help of 4 Roman legions who trapped between 600,000 and 1 million people in the city, right? The resident situation was significantly worsened by the fact that the Jewish extremist group, the Sicarii, we bring this up again. This was an extreme group that was, was wreaking havoc and causing these little civil war factions in the cities. Burned the Jewish population's stocks of food as part of a strategy meant to force them to fight the Romans rather than negotiate surrender. So this is this group Sicarii. They were very gung-ho about fighting the Romans, and the people, they knew how the Romans got down, and they were actually scared of the Romans. And so that they were using extreme measures to make them fight the Romans. Let's keep reading. Following the destruction of the third wall and the Antonia fortress, the Romans set themselves to conquering the temple. Titus supposedly intended to leave the grand stature, just built in preceding century by Herod the Great, intact, to turn it into a temple to Jupiter, but a Roman soldier threw a torch into it and burned it to the ground, famously on the 9th By this point in late August of 70 CE, many Jews fled the city, and others moved to the upper city to make a final stand. The upper city fell on September 7th. Let's go back to Matthew chapter 24, right? Let's read on with what Christ said. It said, when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation. This was when the Romans came in, sacked Jerusalem, as we were just reading, and sacrificed swine in the temple, right? And it says this, spoken by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Verse 16, then let him which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Christ is warning them, like, when that day comes, he's basically saying, you better run. You better flee into the mountains, right? Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. And it's real talk, you know, meaning woe unto them that are with child, meaning understand that we were damn near eating our children because the Romans starved us out, right? He said, don't come down. If you're on the housetop, don't come down. He said, flee into the mountains. And many of us did flee into the mountains. And many of us went into captivity. Now let's keep reading. According to Josephus, the former Jewish general who defected the Romans and became a great historian of the Jewish wars, Titus killed most of the residents of the city and ordered the razing of all but its tallest structures. Titus went on to succeed his father as emperor when Vespasian died. His okay, all right, we're gonna stop it right there. Where's my scripture at? Salaki, bear with me. Which one did I want to pull? Right, and some of the and some of the aristocrats of Israel understand that, you know, they were part of the problem as to why our leadership fell, and the Romans were trying to step in to get more power. The Romans were the ones that gave them more power, gave our leadership more power, but our leadership was corrupt because they were in league with the Romans, right? But anytime you think you can join your oppressor, anytime you think you could be buddy with him, and think that you can live in a peaceful society with him, let's see what the Bible says. Proverbs 11 and 21. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 11, verse 21. Make sure I'm still recording. Okay, Proverbs chapter 11, verse 21. It says this. Though hand join in hand, right? And that's what's going on right now. Hand is joining in hand, and I wonder for what, right? No justice, no peace, Black Lives Matter, right? You know, hate crimes towards black people have been going on for a very long time. And this is the first instance where you see our oppressor in mass numbers has joined this cause. And you have to wonder if there's an ulterior motive to them joining this cause, right? Do our oppressors, are they really sincere about this cause? Are they really, you know, does it break their spirit to see another black man die, right? Well, here's what the Bible says, right? Though hand join in hand, the wicked shall not be unpunished. So all the people that have joined, all these devils that have joined this cause, right? That have joined, that are rioting, that are protesting, doing peaceful protesting and rioting, right? In coalition with our brothers and sisters. Here's what the Bible says. Though hand join in hand, the wicked shall not be unpunished, but the seed of the righteous shall be delivered. You know what I mean? We're going to get delivered out of this. Our oppressor, he's not going to go unpunished. Right? Salaki. Let's get to 2 Thessalonians 2 and 3. All right. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because earlier we spoke about identifying who your enemy is, right? And why it's so important. And to know and to really see the signs and follow the trail to how your enemy operates, right? And why it's important to know who he is. And let's see what 2 Thessalonians. We're going to go to chapter 2, verse 3. It says this, right? He says, "Now I beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord, Yahushua Mashiach, and by our gathering together unto him." Verse 2, "That ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as the day of Christ is at hand." We listen, we at the end. You know what I mean? Like, the days of our punishments is over. We are at the end. And it says the day of Christ is at hand. I mean, it's right around the corner. And here's what you have to pay attention to. Verse 3. He said, "Let no man deceive you." And that's what they're trying to do. Your leaders, your mama, your wife, the Christians. He's saying, "Let no man deceive you." And he says, "Let no man deceive you by any means," right? And how are they trying to deceive you? Let's find out. It says, "For that day shall not come." What day? When Christ comes back. Which is why our oppressor is preparing for Christ to come back. He's preparing to fight the Most High. And so that's why the Starship program is important. That's why they're building us. They've created a space army, right? There's a reason for that. Because he's saying, "For that day shall not come," right? Why is it not? Why won't it come? Let's find out why won't it come. It says, "Except there come a falling away first." Here's what you'll have to understand. There's two things that you have to pay attention to during this time. The first thing he says, "Except there's a falling away first." The falling away first is talking about the white man's kingdom falling, America or Babylon falling, the economy crumbling, right? America imploding, right? The falling away is America becoming a third world country, becoming America. It's America losing its shine, right? And so it's basically explaining the white man's fall and his kingdom. Now, here's the second thing you have to understand, and you should not let nobody deceive you. It says this, "And that the man of sin be revealed." Who is the man of sin that Paul was talking about? Right? The man of sin that Paul was talking about is the so-called white man. Right? He is the man of sin. Right? Everything about him goes against the Most High. And you know what has to be revealed? You know, if you really want to, if you want me to break this down in layman terms as to what needs to be revealed, the man of sin has to be revealed. Meaning this: when the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge is on every corner in America saying that our oppressor is the devil that the Bible speaks of, what we're doing is we're revealing the man of sin. He's the reason why you're a drug addict today. He's the reason why you're homosexual today. He's the reason why you're breaking the Most High's dietary laws, and you think that eating pork is the new white meat. He's the reason. You know what I'm saying? It's the same thing that Christ was saying in Genesis 8 and 44. And he was saying it to the black leadership during that time when they were under Roman occupation. He said, ye are of your father, the devil. He was talking about the Romans. And guess what? The man of sin that needs to be revealed are the Romans and the Greeks, or the children or their children, which are prancing around on this earth today. Those European nations. What has to be revealed is that he is the devil that the Bible speaks of. That's what has to be revealed. You cannot omit that in your mind. You think marching and seeking the peace of your enemy is going to work. It's going to lead to your destruction. And when Christ comes back, if he sees you buddied up with him, well, guess what? You're gonna get caught in the line of fire. You don't want to get in the crosshairs of your enemy when Christ comes back. Let me get let's do Deuteronomy 23 and 6. See, all this marching and protesting, there's one thing that you're trying to do that will never work. You're trying to seek the peace of your oppressor. When you talk about 40 acres and a mule, you're trying to seek his prosperity is what you're trying to do, right? Well, here's what the Bible says. Deuteronomy chapter 23 verse 6. It says this. Salaki, let me get a better one. Let's go to Ezra chapter 9 verse 12. Right? It says, now therefore give not your daughters unto their sons, neither take their daughters unto your sons. The Lord is specifically telling you that we are not to have interracial relationships with our oppressor or any of these heathen nations. It's the reason why he destroyed the earth the first time. It's because of interracial marriage, right? And here's what it says here. Nor seek their peace or their wealth forever. Key word, forever. You are not supposed to seek their peace. You going out there protesting, marching, is you seeking their peace, right? And the reason why he's saying that is because of this next line right here. That ye may be strong and eat the good of the land and leave it for an inheritance unto your children forever. This is how we'll get our strength, is when we separate from our enemies. We will be able to get our strength again, right? Right now we're sheeps. The Lord is trying to make a lion out of a sheep. And he can never do that with you marching with Billy and destroying properties with Billy. And understand this, right? When the Israelites during the siege in 70 AD decided to revolt, right? And those that were in the city were pushing for this revolt, doing certain things to entice the people. Understand that once that revolt was over, the Romans put us through hell. Many of us went into captivity. Many of us was thrown into the Colosseums. Many of us was made slaves after that. Understand this. All this rioting that you're doing as a brother or sister, all this chaos and riotous behavior that you're doing, when it's all said and done, your oppressor is going to really show his teeth. he's going to be more fierce than ever. Right? There will be no talking back when you get pulled over. If you say a word, you're more than likely going to get shot. I'm going to tell you that right now. Why? Because you're not considering the Lord. You're seeking their peace when these are people that don't have empathy for your feelings. And we're the only nation that does this, that thinks that we can march for justice. Marching has never worked. Okay? Marching has never worked, and it never will work. Revolting against your enemy will never work. Just like they did in 70 AD. They revolted against the Romans, and it didn't work. They end up getting slaughtered. Right? You really got to wake up. Two things you should have learned today. The first thing is understand that America is going to fall. Right? Society as we know it will be no more. It is going to be finished. Right? Number two, the second thing you have to understand, more important than anything, is identifying who your enemy is. Studying your enemy. And over here in the UPK, we have studied our oppressor. We know his behavior. We know how to move in the midst of a snake. A snake just doesn't come out in the open. A snake is in the bushes. A snake catches you by surprise. And with that, we're going to end the class with the Israelite School Universal Practical Knowledge. Started out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under Commander General Yohana since 1969. Tomorrow is the Brotherhood class. Tune in online at ISBK Boston. Facebook, ISBK Boston No Cowards on YouTube. Check us on Twitter. We're basically on all the social media platforms. Wednesday is the law class, also from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Definitely tune in now more than ever. We are looking for soldiers. Salaki, so what book is that history you're reading from? Salaki, Seminole Boy. A lot of that is common knowledge. You can definitely just source it online. You'll see that all the sources are pretty much similar. But you can read a book called Josephus when it talks about the Jewish wars. That's one book you could read. There's a bunch of them out there. You just got to be able to clue in which one. But that was just a particular source online that I was reading from. I read from 2 or 3 sources. But with that, we go into class. The water for tuning in. Last announcement, make sure you check in with Commander General Yohana's radio show tonight. It's called The Black Watch with Commander General Yohana, right? It's Monday at 9 p.m. Definitely tune in tonight. The General is going to be blazing. You don't want to miss this. You want to tune in every week to get the UPK stance on what's going on out there. And with that, shalom. Love you, Israel.